Hey everyone, it has been literally 100 degrees in Minneapolis, so if you see me melting up here, now you know why. Alright, now I've never really spoken about this, but I've had a really long and winding road on my skincare journey. I was a teen in the early 2000s before the general public had ever heard of concepts like a skin barrier, and at least in my book, less is more was never the answer. I was in all-out war against my teenage pimples. Astringents, peroxides, fragrances, insufficient moisture, frequent washing, all just piled on top of each other to result in red, flaky, and somehow still pimply skin. That was the absolute bane of my teenage existence. At one point it got so bad that I refused to go out in public without a layer of makeup on. I felt like my bare face was literally painful for other people to see, and it really took a huge toll on my confidence. I wish I had had access to information and actually gently formulated skincare products back then instead of absolutely ravaging my skin for years, leaving permanent acne scars that are still visible on my cheeks. Good makeup and lighting mask a lot of skin texture, so don't believe what you see on social media, though considering how much I am sweating in this weather, you might be able to see it on my melting makeup. Anyway, because of my long skin journey and my passion to increase access to information generally, I wanted to make this video talking all about regulations of skincare ingredients in the US and compare that to regulations in the UK. I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, SLMD Skincare. SLMD Skincare was founded by board-certified dermatologist Dr. Sandra Lee, best known as Dr. Pimple Popper. Ever heard of her? SLMD Skincare believes that dermatology should be accessible to all, especially because they know that for a lot of people it's not. SLMD Skincare is here to bridge the gap between a doctor's visit and a trip down the skincare aisle. By providing expert knowledge, thoughtful counsel, and effective products, they empower people to take their skin health into their own hands and ultimately make good choices that work for them. Dr. Sandra Lee has curated every system and helped develop every formula to create products that she knows will work because she sees them work every day. SLMD Skincare sets out to provide targeted solutions for the most common skin conditions: face and body blemishes, keratosis pilaris, scars and dark spots, dry skin, and irritation, using effective, scientifically proven ingredients that dermatologists use themselves, but at over-the-counter levels. Now that my teenage pimply skin days are behind me, my biggest concern with my skin is proper hydration and sag and wrinkle prevention. I've loved using SLMD's Dream On Retinol Night Cream. It's super thick and moisturizing but doesn't feel too heavy, and there's no fragrance. It's just nice and simple. And I've loved pairing that with the Night Light Retinol Eye Cream. In the morning, I love boosting my skin's moisture with their hyaluronic acid serum and then popping on their Dual Defender SPF 30 sunscreen and moisturizer. Again, no irritating fragrances, just a simple product curated by Dr. Pimple Popper herself, Dr. Sandra Lee. Exclusive to my viewers, use code Leeja10 for 10% off your order on both the US and UK SLMD websites. Both are linked below. Thanks to SLMD Skincare for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so you've probably heard, or maybe you haven't, that there's a ton more chemicals outlawed in the UK and the EU than in the United States. Why the heck is that, and what does that even mean in the context of skincare products? Let's discuss. Okay, so in the United States, skincare products which fall under the general category of cosmetics are regulated by the Food and Drug Administration, aka the FDA. The Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetics Act defines a cosmetic as articles intended to be rubbed, poured, sprinkled, or sprayed on, introduced into, or otherwise applied to the human body for cleansing, beautifying, promoting attractiveness, or altering the appearance. I love when lawyers have to define things like that. So literal and kooky. However, there are some interesting exceptions to what the FDA actually has the power to do. For example, unlike how the FDA regulates drugs, cosmetics do not require pre-approval before going to market, except in the case of color additives. So they can't control what enters the market or the formulation of the product before it enters the market. Manufacturers can use whatever ingredients they want as long as they aren't color additives or ingredients on the list of ingredients that the FDA has specifically prohibited, which we'll get to in a sec. Also, the products must be safe under labeled or customary conditions of use, meaning if the product is used in the way it was intended, it's not allowed to injure someone, like causing significant burning, scarring, sickness, illness, etc. Okay? So the product just has to be safe and has to be properly labeled. However, there are instances, especially for example with SLMD's products that help treat acne, where a cosmetic is also a drug. If it's meant to improve both the appearance but also treat an issue like acne or prevent sunburn like sunscreen, then it's also a drug, or sometimes called a cosmeceutical, though the FDA doesn't officially recognize that wording. In that case, the cosmetic does have to be pre-approved before it goes on the market. However, if the drug in general has already been approved, like a chemical used for sunscreen, for example, then the cosmeceutical can move forward without pre-approval by the FDA. Additionally, cosmetics on the market cannot be adulterated or misbranded, meaning that the product can't contain poisonous or illegal substances, and it can't be rotten or have been prepared in unsanitary conditions, and it must be properly labeled. I go over labeling and description requirements of cosmetics on a separate video that I made special for the SLMD skincare YouTube channel, linked below. Go check it out after this video. Okay, but if a cosmetic is found to be hazardous, can the FDA order a recall? Nope. They can ask nicely, and sometimes they do request recalls, but it's ultimately up to the cosmetic company itself to order a recall of their own product if one of their products appears to be hazardous. And it's probably in the company's best interest to recall bad products, but that self-regulation is left entirely in the hands of the company. It's also left in the company's hands to test its own products to make sure they're safe for consumers. The FDA doesn't provide a list of required tests. Everything is left in the hands of the company to self-regulate. Okay, but that's regarding whether a cosmetic is hazardous. If it's found to be adulterated or misbranded, the FDA does have the authority to take regulatory action, meaning they can go through the Federal Department of Justice to ask a judge to order the removal of adulterated or misbranded cosmetics from the market, or ask a judge to order the seizure of misbranded or adulterated cosmetics. They can also ask a judge to prohibit the manufacturer from selling more of the misbranded or adulterated product. Okay, so in the case of a product that doesn't have ingredients properly labeled, or that was made in a dirty facility or has gone bad, the FDA can do something. The FDA can also inspect cosmetic manufacturing facilities to ensure product safety and that products aren't being adulterated or misbranded. But in the case of a cosmetic containing an ingredient not on the list of ingredients banned by the FDA, there's really not much that the FDA can do, even if studies have shown the ingredient could be harmful, like the ingredient may cause cancer, for example. And when the FDA does make any sort of regulatory action, the burden is on the FDA to prove that the product is harmful, not on the manufacturer to prove that the product is safe. And if you know anything about mass torts, like in the movie Erin Brockovich, for example, showing something is unsafe when that thing is causing long-term illnesses like cancer can be really difficult. It's really hard to link one company's actions to cancer that develops 15 years later, you know? It's a steep hill, and the FDA likely isn't going to take any action unless they have grounds to believe that a product is actively causing harm. Usually cancer is a bit too vicarious. You know what I mean? The FDA can only really act if a substance in a cosmetic is like actively poisoning people in ways that are more immediate. So let's look at the FDA's list of banned ingredients. Remember, this is in addition to most colorants. Colorants can't be used at all in cosmetics except for in ways specified by the FDA, like for hair color. So in addition to colorants, here are the other ingredients banned by the FDA. In all, there's about 11. But interestingly, many of the more notable ingredients have equally as notable exceptions. For example, chloroform. No chloroform allowed in cosmetics. Great. Except there can be residual amounts because they still use chloroform as a processing solvent during manufacture, and it can sometimes apparently be created as a byproduct from the synthesis of an ingredient. In that case, residual amounts of chloroform in your cosmetics are A-okay. Hexachlorophene, aka HCP, is toxic and can penetrate human skin. No HCP unless no other preservative has been shown to be as effective. If you really need it as a preservative, then that's fine, up to 0.1%. But definitely not in cosmetics that are to be applied to mucous membranes like the mouth. But the skin right around the mouth, probably fine. 0.1% of this toxin is fine. Mercury compounds. No mercury compounds allowed in your cosmetics, unless, of course, it's a product limited to the eye area. Then 65 parts per million of mercury is just fine, but only if no other effective and safe preservative is available. So I guess instead of saying like, hey, no mercury, and if you find you need a teensy amount of it for preservative purposes, well, you're shit out of luck, still no mercury. No, the FDA didn't say that. Instead, they said, well, if you really can't find anything better, then I guess you can use a little mercury as a treat, but only around the eyes. The eyes are fine. Okay, and as far as the US goes, that's pretty much it. The FDA just concerns itself with a short list of banned substances and then tackling cosmetics that are adulterated or misbranded. Everything else is fair game. A real Wild West, frankly. And that's at the federal level. States can individually pass laws to enact greater protections than what the feds require. Most notably, California passed Proposition 65, which requires any product, including cosmetics, that is sold in California to have a label indicating that it contains a product that is on California's list of hazardous chemicals. That list is currently around 860 chemicals long. So California provides much greater protections against chemicals that have been found to be hazardous than the federal government or pretty much anywhere else in the US. So with that in mind, let's look at the UK. In the UK, a cosmetic is defined as any substance or mixture intended to be placed in contact with the external parts of the human body, epidermis, hair system, nails, lips, and external genital organs, or with the teeth and the mucous membranes of the oral cavity with a view exclusively or mainly to cleaning them, perfuming them, changing their appearance, protecting them, keeping them in good condition, or correcting body odors. Okay, so already we have a much broader definition of what a cosmetic is in the UK than in the US. In the US, for example, soap does not fall under the definition of a cosmetic, nor does toothpaste. So any UK regulation of a cosmetic will be much more sweeping than any US regulation of a cosmetic, and cover many more products. UK law requires that cosmetics must be safe and not hazardous. The law also requires that a cosmetic manufacturer, if they have reason to believe that a cosmetic is hazardous, must immediately take corrective measures necessary to either change the product or recall it, and must inform the authorities and then comply with that authority's requests. Remember how in the US the FDA can ask nicely, but the cosmetic company can kind of do what it wants? Yeah, not so much in the UK. The law in the UK actually has some teeth, and it requires companies to comply. Of course, this is if the company has reason to believe the product is hazardous and puts the onus on the company as opposed to the regulatory body to find and report hazardous products. In addition to that, the law in the UK requires that the cosmetic be tested prior to being placed on the market. It must undergo a safety assessment, and they must set up a product safety report. There's whole sections of UK law dedicated to the safety assessment and how it must be conducted. Remember that in the US, there is no requirement for any safety assessment. And in the UK, once a product is placed on the market, the company has to notify the Secretary of State and provide information about the ingredients in the product. And that's for every product that's released in the UK market. Okay, and obviously those ingredients cannot be on the UK list of substances prohibited in cosmetic products. Remember that the US had 11? Okay, let's take a look at the UK list. Yep. Keep scrolling. For those of you keeping count at home, that's 1,644 banned ingredients. Okay, those are the ingredients that are outright banned and doesn't include regulation around specific ingredients that may be fine, but identified as medicinal and therefore requires pharmacist consultation. I'm thinking specifically of benzoyl peroxide. Here in the US, any old teen can go grab a tube of 5% benzoyl peroxide and go to town. I ruined many a pillowcase with my benzoyl peroxide use in my teens. In the UK, however, it's considered medicinal, and while you don't necessarily need a prescription for a lower dose topical treatment, you do have to consult with a pharmacist before you can get your hands on it. That's why, for example, SLMD's skincare in the US has a benzoyl peroxide body wash to help with acne on other parts of the body, whereas if you're in the UK, they have a similar product, but it's a salicylic acid body wash with no benzoyl peroxide. Basically, in the UK and the EU as well, which has similar levels of regulation, the approach is caution. Let's make certain that we're keeping everything that might be harmful out of these products. In fact, many of the chemicals on that list of 1,600 banned chemicals aren't even chemicals that would ever really be used in a cosmetic product, but they're banned just in case, because in the US, the regulatory name of the game is caution, which means producers of cosmetics products have to jump through more hoops, but it also gives greater assurances that chemicals, ones that you or I might not even know are harmful, are kept out of their cosmetics. In the US, on the other hand, regulation is more lax. I'm certain there had to be a lot of involvement by big cosmetic companies lobbying for lax regulation, because it really benefits the cosmetic companies for them to not have to jump through many regulatory hoops with their products. And I'm sure a rather libertarian argument can be made that if someone wants to put something on their skin, they should have the freedom to do so. Very Ron Swanson of you. And a very American mentality as well. So as it stands, there's a lot of stuff floating around in US cosmetics that are not in cosmetics in the UK and in the EU, which frankly is a little spooky. And it's why I'm a fan of the sponsor of today's video, SLMD Skincare, because I feel confident that it's formulated by trained dermatologists and it provides you with the knowledge and dermatologist guidance that you need to make informed decisions, even if going to see a dermatologist in person is not accessible for you right now. Thanks to SLMD for sponsoring this video. Reminder to use code Leeja10 at the link in the description below for 10% off your order with SLMD Skincare. Don't forget to go check out my other video over on SLMD Skincare's official YouTube channel, all about labeling requirements and why certain products in the US say one thing when they say something totally different across the pond in the UK. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.